What is the best ever film from each decade from the 1920s all the way up to the current decade in the 2020s so far? Today I'm going to be giving you my number one film from each decade, explaining a little bit about why, and then some honourable mentions as well. Let's kick it off with the 1920s. For the 1920s, I had a few options. We had The Passion of Joan of Arc, The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, Nosferatu, German expressionist films. You've got also things like He Who Got Slapped, which is a comical, disturbing piece of horror. But what I'm going to go for is the Japanese silent film, A Page of Madness. This is a bizarre, terrifying collection of gut-wrenching imagery. As haunting as it is disturbing, this won't be for everyone, but it certainly was for me. It's a weird, wild delight with themes of institutionalization, themes of mental illness, and something that clearly took a lot of inspiration from that German silent era, but put its own little Japanese twist on it, and I would recommend it to everyone listening. For the 1930s, we also had a few options such as The Invisible Man, the original King Kong, Wizard of Oz, the first Frankenstein. But the film I have of course gone for is one of my favourites ever, let alone from this decade, is The Bride of Frankenstein. And what I believe to be one of the greatest sequels I've ever made. The Bride of Frankenstein is a beautiful story on acceptance, on friendship. It's a sad told story that is as funny as it is devastating. It's so ever-see quotable, it's stylish, it was way ahead of its time when it comes to the production, the special effects, which still hold up today, almost 100 years on. The Bride of Frankenstein, to me, is arguably a perfect film and is one of my favourite films of all time. For the 1940s, we had many great options. You've got The Treasure of Sierra Madre, you've got It's a Wonderful Life, Citizen Kane, Casablanca, and so on and so on. But the film I've chosen to go for is the satire anti-war film from the World War II era. It actually came out in 1942. To Be or Not to Be, one of the best anti-war satires I've ever seen. Not just one that is profound with its importance and showcases the grand ordeal and the gravity of the situation at hand, but one that really has stood the test of its time with its humour as well. Laugh out loud moments from start to finish, beautifully acted, and has the perfect balance between the comic tone and the gravity of the situation, as I just mentioned. And To Be or Not to Be is definitely one of my favourite, not just anti-war, but comedies ever made. For the 1950s, there is an abundance of amazing options. 12 Angry Men, The Seventh Seal, Sunset Boulevard, Dial M for Murder, Rashomon, Kurosawa's samurai epic, Seven Samurai, Singing in the Rain, Rear Window. The list goes on and on and on, but the picture I have actually chosen is the 1957 Kubrick anti-war film, Paths of Glory. An accurate portrayal of warfare, a comic portrayal of warfare, and one that really showcased the pointlessness nature of the warfare as well. One that was bold, was brave, and was different to other war films, especially around that time. Bear in mind, Kubrick was only in his late 20s. The depiction of a misguided reasoning for war. It's stylish, it's flair, it's sad, it's devastating. The ending just stays with you for such a long period of time. And more than that, it's technically so proficient, so brilliant, a true technical marvel, as stylish as it is profound. The 1960s was a really hard one for me. You've got things like Kes, a childhood favourite of mine, Through a Glass Darkly, one of my favourite Bergmans ever, Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho, the original Planet of the Apes, The Graduate, and the list goes on and on and on again. But I'm going to pick my favourite ever from Ingmar Bergman, which is his Persona. Such as many of Bergman's films, I do believe Persona to be a masterpiece, especially of its time, and one that has had so much influence on the respective genres. It's a look at identity, a look at goals, a look at sexuality, and it's a really touching film with not only beautifully profound notes and themes, but one that is such a technical marvel on display as well, with the use of blocking and framing. It has some of the most iconic and my most favourite shots of all time, the beautiful duo of Liv Ullmann and Bibi Andersson standing strong, doing exactly what they need to, and producing two of my favourite acting performances ever. It's a real masterpiece in showcasing what can be done with cinema, and showcasing the visual flair that Bergman had, and showcasing everything he was good at. It is one of what I would consider two of his films that are his quintessential works to showcase everything he can tell with regards of identity, religion, sexuality. And it's so obscure, and it may require a couple of viewings for most people to understand most of the themes that are presented and thrown at you, as it is subtle in its portrayal and isn't exactly obvious, and it doesn't spoon feed you anything at all. And that's why I think it's so great. Whenever you watch it again, you'll capture things that you missed on the first watch. Persona is just, for me, I remember the first time I watched it twice. in like the space of 2 days, and that says all you need to know. I love Persona. I think it's a true masterpiece and one of the greatest films ever made. The 70s is absolutely ridiculous. It is, in my opinion, the greatest decade in cinematic history. You've got things like Lynch's Eraserhead, Suspiria, Apocalypse Now, The Godfather, Taxi Driver, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, genre-defining Texas Chainsaw Massacre. But I've, of course, gone for possibly my favourite not only horror, but my favourite sci-fi of all time, Ridley Scott's Alien. A masterfully structured film, a monumental piece of science fiction horror filmmaking, a film that excels in its unique sets, claustrophobic design, beautiful performances, and a fantastic use of practical effects. It is a masterclass in cinematic paranoia, and every little element stands up today as being, in my opinion, one of the greatest films and one of the most important films in that genre of all time. And I think it really is, for me, Ridley Scott's true masterpiece. And is not only my favourite from the 70s, if I had to put a numerical figure on it, it would be within my top 3 films ever, and probably be within my top 3 films that I've watched the most times, given the fact I've probably watched it 50 plus at this point. The 1980s is, again, absolutely ridiculous. You've got things like De Palma's Blowout, you've got the Do the Right Thing, you've got Come and See, you've got John Carpenter's masterpiece with The Thing, Michael Mann's Thief, Bergman's Finding Alexander. But for me, it will have to go to one of my favourite horrors of all time. I count this as being the film that really got me in cinema at a young age, and that is The Shining. A film that explores real horrors, child abuse, alcoholism, murder, and showcases a man's true descent into madness with the consequences of being isolated for a long period of time. But not only that, it's a technical marvel that has some of the most fantastic shots ever. I think it's so incredible, and it's cemented itself as one of the best and most important, not only horrors, but psychological thrillers ever made. And I think what is most impressive, intricacy with the detail, such as the parallel between what Jack wears at the start of the film to the maze. When you watch the actual documentary Room 237, it showcases everything, the intricacy, and showcases just how good Kubrick was at his craft, and be able to create blocking, create framing, create the perfect composition for a shot, and get the best out of his actors. The Shining is easily one of my favourite films of all time. The 1990s is another decade that is just completely stacked across the board, and my pick might be an unpopular one here. You've got Schindler's List, you've got Pulp Fiction, you've got Heat, you've got Silence of the Lambs, you've got Scorsese's Goodfellas, you've got Perfect Blue, Tojo Khan's Perfect Blue, but my pick is going to be my favourite David Lynch film, Lost Highway. A surrealist masterpiece that has really so much going for it, but not much. I find that films like this, they're not meant to be explored further. You can create theories off this, and there is a lot of basis for those theories that you see online. And I've created a couple myself after a few viewings of what the story actually means. But I think further than that, it is just another example of Lynch completely pushing the boundaries when it comes to visual cinema. It's a surrealist masterpiece with a phenomenal soundtrack, beautifully acting. It's arguably Lynch's scariest film, along with obviously his last feature project with Inland Empire. And I just think it's so absurd, so wild, it's crazy, it's enjoyable, and more than that, it has one of the most electric and exciting final half an hours or final 15-20 minutes in a film I've ever seen. It's one that I've regularly gone back to just to watch the ending one more time. 2000s again is another stacked decade. You've got some of my favorite films like Oldboy, M. Night Signs, Dogville, Battle Royale, No Country for Old Men, Ratatouille, shout out Ratatouille, The Dark Knight even, This Is England, etc, etc. I could go on and on and on. But my pick is, of course, going to be Lord of the Rings. I do count them as one film usually, but I will give you an individual one from this go. I'm going to say, obviously, The Return of the King. The Lord of the Rings films mean the most to me out of any film. They've got me out of some really dark places in my life. They've helped me up when I'm down. Everything to me in terms of creating this huge fictional epic. I grew up reading the books, I grew up watching the films on a weekly basis. They mean so much to me, I could recite them word by word. Lord of the Rings is one of those films that everyone has a distinct connection to, and everyone loves, well, not everyone loves, but people love for different reasons. But for me, it really was the thing that helped me as a kid, helped me get through harder times in my life, and was the perfect example of a huge fantasy epic blockbuster with thrilling sequences, emotional tones, hits all the right narrative beats, and was a perfect adaptation put to screen from a beautiful collection of books that I don't think any other director other than Peter Jackson would have been able to nail at that time. The Hobbits are, of course, a different story, but The Lord of the Rings remain perfect in my eyes. The 2010s is a really tough one. You've got Parasite, Portrait of a Lady on Fire, Martin Scorsese's Silence, The Hunt, Moonlight, Whiplash, Your Name. I can go on and on and on, but my pick is actually going to be a little bit of a different one today. I'm going to go for Paul Schrader's First Reformed. I think First Reformed is one of the most powerful and profound films I've ever seen. It's incredibly textured and layered whilst being so bleak with its cinematography. Transcendent style, which left me so much to chew on in terms of the environment, in terms of religion, in terms of nature, in terms of morals. There's so much to this film. Ethan Hawke, he delivers his best performance, and this arguably is Paul Schrader's best ever script. Creates a man, such as of loneliness and isolation. Paul Schrader's First Reformed is one of the most profound films I've ever seen. It is truly impeccable and a work of art, not just on a thematic sense, but also a visual sense as well, and proves to be, again, and like many of these films, a technical marvel, but I think one that maybe goes under the radar slightly as well. And finally, the 2020s. Obviously, we are only a few years in, so there's much to come. You've had Tar, we've got Dune, we've got Another Round, we've got Across the Spider-Verse, After Sun. We've had a lot of great films over the past few years, but my pick is, of course, going to be last year's The Banshees of Inisherin, a film I have already watched about 5 times, a film that kind of, just one of those that had a profound impact on me from first viewing. It's beautifully toned, it's deceptively honest, from the incredible setting and heartbreaking moments to the many laughs, perfect dialogue and perfect performances, and the beautiful setting and score. It's one of those films that's just raw, had such a massive impact on me, made me cry, made me laugh, made me want to go and see it again. And I think this really, this was a film where I watched it and I realised why I'd fallen in love with cinema in the first place, and it made me just want to watch it again and again and again. I think you'll love a film if you watch it and then you want all your loved ones around you to see it. As soon as I watch it, I took my fiance to watch it, I took my mum to watch it, I got my dad to watch it, and it was just one of those films that had an ongoing effect, and this is slowly actually moving its way up my all-time favourites list. I just think it's a perfect film, and for me, the best film of not only the past few. Made me cry, made me laugh, made me want to go and see it again. And I think this really, this was a film where I watched it and I realised why I'd fallen in love with cinema in the first place, and it made me just want to watch it again and again and again. I think you'll love a film if you watch it and then you want all your loved ones around you to see it. As soon as I watch it, I took my fiance to watch it, I took my mum to watch it, I got my dad to watch it, and it was just one of those films that had an ongoing effect, and this is slowly actually moving its way up my all-time favourites list. I just think it's a perfect film, and for me, the best film of not only the past few years, but maybe even the past decade.